Hello everyone and welcome to the program Midday Discourse on Global Television. My name is Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining at this hour. On today's edition, we'll be looking at enhances teachers' welfare, capacity and working condition, given the fact that ASU have been on loggerheads with the federal government of Nigeria in terms of their welfare, arrearances, and the fact that from 2020 all through to 2024, the 30% of Nigerian workforce, that's teachers to be specific, have left working. That is either by retirement and some persons moving out of the country seeking for greener pastures. But the government, at the other hand, are working tirelessly to see that they meet the needs of all of our teachers in Nigeria, ranging from the government and then the private also, and then the tertiary institution. But on that note, before we get deep into the conversation, let me bring you up to speed with the Academic Staff Union of University, Gombe State University, have declared an indefinite strike following the failure of the state government to meet its demands. The demands itemized by the union include non-implementation of the 2021 Memorandum of Action, increased funding for universities, non-payment of accumulated earnings, academic allowances, non-institutionalization of training for sponsorship of academic staffs for higher degree, and many others. Addressing journalists shortly after the Congress meeting, the branch chairman, Dr. Suleiman Jaro, says the government gave no serious attention to its efforts, adding that the government's refusal has led to this situation where EAA for 2015, 2016, 2016/2017, 2017/2018, and 2018/2019, and also 2021/2022 accumulated, while staff continue to suffer in difficulties challenging exercise workload despite poor working condition. Jero stated that the members of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, Gombe State University branch, have endured an unhealthy working condition in the university for too long as a result of issues of inadequate funding, non-implementation of the content of the 2021 Memorandum of Action, and the refusal to implement current salaries table for the academians in Nigerian university. So, on that note, the Gombe State chapter of ASU decided to go on an indefinite strike. A whole lot of this has been happening. We've witnessed 30% of Nigerian workforce leaving work, some based on retirement, some based on the fact that they are not getting enough welfare. On that note, we are going to be extracting all of these angles and see how the government and other stakeholders would come together to be able to enhance the teaching capacity and also the working environment and also training aspects of Nigerian teachers and schools generally. Joining me live in the studio to help us understand all of this is Olufemi Folabomile, who is certified by Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for joining on today's edition of the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So what as we begin to extract all of these angles, and then definitely there are several challenges, and we know the government are also trying to get things working for teachers and then the country at large. So what are the biggest challenges teachers face in classrooms, and how can they be addressed through professional development?
Thank you very much. So I'm happy that you mentioned that the government is making some strides in terms of making the teaching profession what it's supposed to be in Nigeria. As you mentioned, I am certified by the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. Initially, there was no Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. This body was introduced to, as it were, regularize teaching as a profession in the country. Coming back to your question, the greatest challenges faced by many teachers in the classroom has to do with those of resources. The non-availability of resources, the fact that they are not adequately trained for the tasks that are assigned to them. The fact that they are not properly remunerated is another big challenge. When you are asked to do a job and you are not adequately prepared for it, the outcomes are usually very disastrous. So these are some of the problems. And like you rightly pointed out, one major way we can address these problems is through professional development.
All right. Okay, let's look at it from this other angle. Teachers can be supported from different angles. So how can the government now, support teachers in developing skills for different instructions and inclusive education? Because you made mention of training. Now that means, for you to be able to impart someone, you should have a basic knowledge and have a level kind of training. So how can the government now, have all of these skills in place for teachers?
I think it begins with the policy.
Okay.
So we need to go back to the policies. We need to address teacher training, teacher development in our educational policies. Having said that, it's also important that we focus a lot more on professional development for our teachers. So when you look at those countries, for instance, where teachers appear to be doing very well, where the teaching profession is attractive. One of the things that makes the teaching profession attractive in these countries is the training that the teachers get. So look at countries like Finland, for example. You cannot even go into teaching without being particularly trained as a teacher. And I think the minimum qualification that you must have before you are allowed to teach in a country like Finland is a master's degree. So our government needs to, the private sector as well, we need to look into this area and be more intentional about providing the necessary training. Earlier on, I talked about not being equipped to teach in the classroom.
Yes.
So where you have, for instance, a different area, as it were, of children that you have to teach, coming from different backgrounds, growing up in different homes, you can't expect the teacher to teach them all in the same way and then get the desired results. So teachers need to be trained on how to differentiate, give differentiated instruction. Teachers need to be armed with, knowing how to attend to the specific needs of each child.
Okay, we are going to break this down in different segments. Now we are more focusing on the angle of teachers' development. So we get to the welfare part, right? So looking at technology now, because the world globally is revolving and technology is taking a massive tone in different segments, in different angles of each country, mostly educationally, because that's what bets the future of each country. So what training programs can be implemented to enhance teachers' digital literacy and technology gains for them to be able to perform well in classrooms?
Talking about technology, I recall just in 2020 we had COVID.
Yes.
And COVID opened a lot of us to the wonders of technology, the importance of technology. For instance, where I work, there was a need for us to deploy technology to be able to reach out to the children we teach, online. So in terms of equipping teachers with necessary training in how to leverage technology, there are quite a number of learning management software that teachers can use, as it were. We need to get teachers to become versatile in the use of all of these programs. It's amazing to say that some teachers do not even know how to use Zoom, which is very, very common. So getting teachers to become familiar with the use of technology such as the smart board, where they can easily get children to be more engaged, as it were, in the teaching learning process is very, very important.
All right, let's look at how can teachers now be encouraged to adopt these innovative strategies and assessment methods? Because you made mention now of getting children involved. So there are obviously basic amenities and then knowledge that they need to have. So what are schools now doing? I'm talking about our government schools now and public institutions. What are they doing to encourage teachers to adopt these new innovative strategies?
So one of the main things I've seen government doing is providing more opportunities for teacher training, teacher development. I am aware, for instance, that certain state governments are partnering with some private organizations to deploy massive teacher training programs in various states, and this is very, very commendable. However, I would want to probably advise that beyond looking at subject content, these trainings can also focus a lot more on pedagogic skills. When I say pedagogic skills, I mean skills on how to use specific technology in the classroom. I'm talking about classroom control. I'm talking about being able to identify students who are neurotypical, you call them special needs education students.
Yes.
So this will help our teachers to be much more effective in the classroom.
Okay, let's look at this other angle. Now, mentorship is very key in every sector.
Absolutely.
So how key is it now for teachers to also have those who they are looking up to help establish and then support new teachers that are looking to get into the sector of teaching?
This is a very, very important issue that you have raised. Mentorship is a very crucial aspect of teacher development, and if we have teachers who have gone ahead, teachers who have the experience in their work, it's very, very good to pair up these teachers with the less experienced colleagues and to have them groom such less experienced teachers in various aspects. The only thing I want to add here is that such programs need to be structured, as opposed to just saying, okay, you just go just mentor this teacher. That's vague. So mentorship needs to be structured. So for instance, if I'm mentoring, in what areas am I mentoring? Am I mentoring this teacher so that this teacher can become, better in terms of using technology? Am I mentoring this teacher so that this teacher can become better, as it were, in terms of classroom control? Am I mentoring this teacher such that this teacher can better use the tools of assessment? And so on and so forth. So the mentoring is good, but it has to be very structured.
Very structured. Okay, we'll be going on a very quick break. When we come back, we'll be having our next conversation and talk about the other aspects of teachers' welfare and incentives on how to have retainership for most of our teachers, and also have room for kids to grow up and say they want to be teachers. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Many thanks for joining. If you're just joining, this is Midday Discourse, and I am Samuel Odi, having an interesting conversation on how we plan on enhancing teachers' capacity and training for Nigerian teachers, as well as creating incentives for teachers as well. So, Mr. Fola, looking at the angles of welfare now and benefits now, what benefits and incentives can be offered to attract, retain top teaching talents in Nigeria? Because most of the times, our teaching sector, we just tend to see a whole lot of younger persons, just coming, not because they love teaching, because they couldn't find any other thing to do. So how can we retain our top talented teachers in school, so as, the next generation would also, have more to impact to the next people coming up?
This is a very, very important question that you have asked. In order for us to attract the best talents to teaching, the first thing we need to look at is to accord greater prestige to the teaching profession. Funny enough, in those days when we were growing up, when you have a head teacher in your village, everybody looked at them high up there.
As like the president of the nation. That's a level of respect you get.
I'm not sure it's like that any longer. Of course, the population has grown, you have more children, you have more teaching, but we need to be intentional about attracting the best brains. One way to do that is to increase the compensation, the salary. Okay, what are the perks that go with the teaching profession? Unfortunately, many people came into teaching by accident. So they finished from school, they've looked for those typical jobs, and those jobs didn't come. Okay, well, I'll just settle for teaching. That is unfortunately where we are in Nigeria today. So if you want the best brains to come into teaching, the prestige is very, very important. And this goes, to talk to our government. So we give awards like the Order of the Niger, this OON.
Yes.
How many classroom teachers have won those
awards? True.
So we need to begin to look at making teaching stand out. Compensation, prestige first of all, and then compensation, medical allowances, car loans, even sponsorship in schools, and then giving them opportunities to perhaps experience what it means to study abroad. All of this will go a long way to get the best brains scouting for the teaching profession.
Yes. Okay. Looking at that angle now, we can also talk about mental health and well-being to support through access of counseling and stress management resources. How key is this other angle now? Because we are looking at the welfare, having like 30 to 40 kids that you teach Monday through Friday. It's definitely a whole lot of work, given the fact that these kids are coming from different backgrounds, different homes. So how well key is it going to be that the teacher's mental health is something that is being paid massive attention to?
Very, very excellent question again. Some years ago, I worked with someone, and I noticed that at some point, because of the children in her class, she started to cry. She broke down into tears. And from that experience, I was inspired to write a book titled A Detailed Approach to Classroom Control. Now, talking about mental health, there is a lot that the government can do. But I don't think we should leave everything to the government.
Yes.
There is a lot that we can do as individuals. And that was what motivated me to write that book. In that book, one of the things I mentioned was that teachers needed to pay attention to their methods in terms of classroom control. There are classroom control methods, for instance, that are very, very difficult in terms of the impact they have on the teacher's health. And I had suggested in that book, for instance, that there is a need for you to use student engagement as a way of securing classroom control. Most students misbehave and then cause teachers untold hardship because they are not properly engaged in the classroom. So if we can get our children, the students, to be properly engaged, properly focused in the classroom, the tendency is that teachers will have less work to do. And by implication, the tendency is that we will have less worries about our mental health. Having said that, it's important to also say that I talked about medical, health skills. So if we're able to ensure that teachers have proper, medical health schemes, I am very sure that that will go a long way in helping our teachers to overcome that challenge.
Well, okay, what role does work-life balance play in this angle that you just, you brought out your answers from?
Very, very important. So at the moment, for instance, you have teachers who work. I'll use Abuja as an example, since we're in Abuja.
Yes.
So you have a teacher who works in, let's say, Wuse 2.
Yeah.
And that teacher lives in Maraba. Now, already, there is no way you will convince me that such a teacher will not have, mental health issues. Because the hustles and bustles when you come to work every day.
Very early.
Now, the economy doesn't even help either, because a teacher told me just, a week ago or so that she spends about 4,000 naira every day to come to work and to go back to their house. Now, imagine what impact this will have on their mental health. So, yes, it's an area, I'm not sure, I think I've lost my thought there with your question, but yes, it's an area that we need to, pay.
In terms of work-life balance.
Work-life. So there is a need for teachers to make conscious efforts to balance this. Teaching is a stressful job for the most part. You gave an example of having to work with 30, 40 children.
Yes.
It's not easy. It's not easy. So I read somewhere some years ago that a teacher makes not less than, 1,000 decisions every single day. Where should that student sit? How should I word this concept I want to teach? What sanction should I allocate to that child? As this child eating, do I need to, organize food? Do I need to ensure this child sees the nurse? And so on and so forth. So in order to reduce, the amount of stress, teachers need to strive to eat good food. They need to strive to get enough rest. They need to strive to, drink a lot of water, and so on and so forth. I mean, I'm looking at it now from the perspective of the teacher helping themselves.
Now. Okay, that's actually good. But looking at it now, mostly private schools are like taking over the educational sector in Nigeria. So, how key is it going to be now for the government to step in, despite the fact that we're obviously not wanting to leave everything for the government, but now looking at our public schools, because how key can teachers' physical health be supported through access of wellness programs and healthy work environments? Looking at our government schools, most of the government schools you go to in rural communities, you either you will obviously see a blackboard and then probably roof and all of that. How key can it be for the environment, one, to be conducive for the teacher to be able to pass out that information that you have, and also making the environment conducive for pupils and students to be able to sit and learn from this said teacher?
So first of all, I served in I served in 1997. And when I did my youth service program, it was in one village in Delta State. To start with, there was no electricity in that village.
To start with.
So I came in there as a young, youth corps member, and I remember they had to quickly build, a bathroom for me somewhere in the bush where I was having my bath, and they did all they could. They tried their best.
That's the community.
The community, and I want to really commend them. But looking at that setting, did it really help me to be effective on the job? I'd say a big no. I'd say a big no. And the fact that there was no electricity, there was no pipe-borne water, these were issues. And yet you had teachers who needed to work under those conditions. You had children who needed to learn under those conditions. Coming back to your question, I think the government needs to be more intentional about creating workable environments, about creating environments in which teaching and learning can thrive best. So we look at, for instance, the learning environment. We look at the classroom settings. I was involved in some programs recently where I went to public schools to talk on a concept called, Project Learning to Learn. And during, this period, many of the students had no seats to sit on. It was just a blackboard, like you rightly said. A few of them had whiteboards, but the markers were scarcely available. So government needs to look into equipping these institutions with all of those. That's not all. What about the homes that these teachers return to after work? Housing schemes for teachers would go a long way. Getting, teachers to live in places that are, desirable, to say. So these are some of the ways I think government can help those teachers to work in environments that will enhance their outputs.
Let's look at teachers' motivation now, and the angles of engagement and motivation, right? Let's move away a bit from the welfare. So I'm hoping the government are doing what they can do within their power, and the president is out of the country, signed MOU with China on development, human development skills, and also we are hoping to see that all of these angles would be touched by this recent MOU that have been signed, and then the Minister of Education also doing his own part to be able to curb out these challenges that is being faced by teachers and then even the students themselves. Well, moving away from that, let's talk about engagement and motivation. How can teachers be more involved in decision-making process to increase their sense of ownership and engagement?
Okay, very simple. Involve them in the decision-making process.
Okay.
Not everybody can be the principal. Not everybody can be the headmaster or whatever nomenclature goes in which schools. However, let's say you create or you set up committees, and you set up those committees on a rotational basis, so that at some point each teacher takes their turn to head the committees. This is one proven way you can get every teacher to be involved in the decision-making process.
Okay.
So when they head the committee, it's either that they are the chairperson of the committee, they are the secretary or whatever, but they get to make decisions. And encourage teachers to be involved in research. You know why? Because when you carry out research, the tendency is that you speak to improvement. You offer suggestions or recommendations, as we call them in research, that can be used to make decisions that will promote education. So probably these are just two ways we could help teachers to be more involved in decision making.
Let's look at opportunities that can be provided for teachers to collaborate with, share best practices and colleagues. So that means we are going to be looking at angles of workshops and training. So how is this key? Because most of the times you will see a teacher teaching in a government school, most of the times they find it hard to even compete with a few other teachers from private sector. So how is it going to be key that you have a body that helps bring these teachers together and then for them to share best practices?
Okay, so at the moment I must say that there are a few organizations that are already making this a reality. So earlier on you introduced me as somebody who was who had certification with the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria.
Yes.
So their duty is to regulate the teaching profession and then to make it more professional. That will help a lot of the teachers, especially those in the public schools, to have the requirements, so to speak, to achieve what you have said.
Yeah.
Recently I was opportuned to speak at a conference organized by the British Council in Dubai. It's called Schools Now. And I saw a lot of other teachers speaking like myself. So that's I believe those such platforms are the things that teachers need to hone their skills in the classroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll look at policy now, policy reform and implemented to support teachers and capacity and welfare. So what policies can be put in place now for all of this? So you made mention earlier of housing scheme. What policies can be put now for teachers to be able to have, easy access, to be able to access this? Because if you're looking at this angle now, we have police barracks, we have army barracks. Can we, looking at the housing scheme now, can there be something that will be like, okay, there's this part of the state or the country that we can have lots of teachers where they can go have easy access to get their own homes?
That's an excellent idea. So having such a facility, first and foremost, shows that the government is concerned, shows that the government cares in the well-being of teachers. And you spoke about teacher wellness earlier on. If the government consciously, put such facilities in place around the country, I believe it will go a long way. In terms of policies, another thing we could look at is having schools that you call prototypes.
Yeah.
So those schools are maybe private driven, but then we have our public school teachers having access to those schools, and then enjoying all of the benefits, as it were, that go with such prototype schools. So if we have such policies, I believe that would go a long way. We also need to look at training. At the moment, I cannot really say there is a structured training program for our teachers. So this is something that we probably also need to look at. The health insurance scheme, tailored specifically for teachers, is another policy that we could consider in order to make life better, especially for our public school teachers.
Okay. Also come back and then talk about investment angles that that can help prepare teachers for the ongoing profession development. But before we get into that, I would like us to go on a very quick break, and then when we return back, Midday Discourse continues.
Time check. It's midday. Then it's Midday Discourse. Midday Discourse is a program that covers trending local and international news, current issues, and human-related topics. Join Samuel Odi weekdays 1 p.m. on Global Television. The discussion starts here.
Many thanks for staying with us. So we are still going to having this conversation about teachers' well-being, and then how to get them involved and all of that. So what investments can be made in teacher preparation and in the ongoing professional development?
So the greatest investment that can be made would be in the area of teacher training. We need to invest massively in teacher training, particularly at maybe the teacher colleges of education, in terms of helping those who have acquired their certifications to develop their skills, get them to take relevant certifications in education. Look possibly at campaigns, campaigns organized by the teachers themselves in trying to create awareness about the teaching profession and so on and so forth. But if we invest in teacher training and possibly also in resources, because at the moment you have a lot of classrooms in public schools where resources are not available. So we need to invest in these resources so that our children are better trained, better groomed. You have some, of this software. I don't want to market any organization, but you have some of this software that you see heavily in many private schools. They're nowhere to be found in public schools. So the government, I think, through a private sector driven program, can look into ways of equipping public schools with such investment. I believe that with that, the teaching profession will experience better outcomes.
Okay, that's with all of that. Now then, let's look at elevation now. How can teaching profession be elevated and valued through public awareness campaign and community engagement? If you move around now, maybe let's say probably 10 out of, maybe 1 out of 10 pupils being gathered and asked the question, what would you like to be in future? You will hear doctor, pilot, astronaut, and all of that. You will rarely hear a child that would say he or she wants to be a teacher, given the fact that the teaching profession is not being rated or valued as those other professions that I rightly mentioned. So what can be done now to be able to elevate the teaching profession, and what kind of engagement does communities need to, get involved with so as to have the teaching profession valued at that same class as that of doctoring and nurses?
So earlier on, I talked about prestige.
Prestige, yes.
And I had made mention of some of the national awards that are being received in, within the shores of our country. We can begin to look into ensuring that teachers are, given access to such awards. When the community notices that everyone is singing the praise of the teaching profession, there is a higher likelihood that more people will want to go into that profession. So, like I also said earlier on, in those days when we were growing up, the headmaster was highly revered. They
usually have a bicycle.
They have a bicycle. I think they wore their short knickers, but they were well respected. We need to, go back to, not necessarily go back to, the past, but to a situation where that respect comes back. And how will it come back? When the government takes conscious effort to recognize teachers. By the way, in 2018, I received an award from an organization in Lagos. It was a national award. And I didn't only receive the award, it came with, some very good money. And I know that people who saw that would have been motivated to want to become teachers. So in terms of, communal efforts, organizations can, stand up and say, okay, we want to sponsor, a program where we recognize teachers. We're having a lot of that in Nigeria nowadays. It's commendable, and I want to say that the organizers should keep up the good work.
That's very, very key. But let's look at ASU now. Basically what they've been clamoring for all these years now have been, arrears is not being paid, and how can it be, or what can be done now to be able to soften this? Because now the Gombe State chapter have embarked on their own now, and we know how long this usually drags. It drags for like months, like sometimes years. Like a semester would be done, maybe 2 semesters can be done. A section can even come and go, and then this strike is still on. What can be done? How key is it going to be for the government to meet the needs or the MOA that was signed of 2021 to be met, so as not to be having this back-to-back strike from ASU?
So, unfortunately, I was a victim of ASU strike back in those days. My university lecturers went on strike, and I had to be at home for, I think the longest there was about 9 months or so.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
And
when you were working on one of your doctorate degrees?
No, I was even an undergraduate then. I was an undergraduate then.
Okay.
And I was at the University of Ilorin.
Okay.
But let's say that most of the demands of ASU ultimately are in the right direction.
Okay.
You know why I said that?
Right.
So, for instance, the university lecturers are asking for autonomy. University autonomy. They want to be able to do things on their own. They want to be able to take education to higher levels, as it were. In order to achieve that, those schools need to be better equipped for research. We spoke about research,
yes.
not long ago. Those schools need to be better equipped with resources. I want to encourage the government to get into fruitful dialogues with the ASU people. I'm not campaigning for ASU now,
yes.
but I think where we're able to talk freely and where such conversations are honest, where they are open, I am pretty sure that we can solve this age-long problems of ASU. Again, it's the students who are suffering it the most.
Yes.
If you don't have money to put your children in a private university,
Or send
so
your children out
what
abroad.
becomes of your children? This is an issue that has been on for as long as I've been being conscious of myself, and I think that it's high time we nipped it in the bud. What are those developed countries doing? You don't hear of the school strikes by university dons and what have you. We need to be able to pattern our education after what goes in most of those other climes.
All right. Thank you so much for taking our time to join us on today's edition of the program, Olufemi Folaponmile. Thank you so much, a certified member, Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, sir. So that's how much time will permit us to take on today's edition of the program. I am Samuel Odi. Have an amazing weekend ahead. I'll see you again. Bye for now.